Hey, if I don't see anyone having an additional question, that was a lot of fun, and there's a lot that I have just learned. Uh, we do have another paper from uh, Miroslav, who is going to talk about learning from Cobra Kai. I've already learned from Cobra Kai, but he's going to explain how I can learn even more.
Right. Okay, so I take it that most of you have seen the TV series Cobra Kai. If not, basically, Lance hasn't. Well, you may remember the Karate Kid movies from the mid-80s. And this basically picks up on these movies and shows us what happened 34 years later with the young fighters from the 80s. They're all grown up now, and this is basically what's it all about. And Daniel's son, the original Karate Kid, he's got an auto dealership. He sells cars, and he hasn't really taught karate. And we get introduced to his former nemesis, Johnny Lawrence, the guy he beat in that competition with his crane kick, who starts teaching one student and then opens a dojo and so on and so on. So they both start teaching karate. They're rivals, they're still rivals. And this is where the drama of the series comes from. They both have kids. The kids also do martial arts, also do karate, and so there's additional drama. So that's basically the background. What interests me are two or three themes. The first theme I want to talk about is the good contest, because we see in this series this split that we have seen since the beginning of the 20th century in sporting activity in the West. The idea of winning at all costs, and contrasting that with good sportsmanship, how these two things come apart. And we see the same thing in Cobra Kai, in martial arts, particularly if these martial arts have a sports side like Olympic Taekwondo or Olympic Judo. And of course, in Tokyo, karate is supposed to be an exhibition discipline. And I see a parallel there. I see that in martial arts, which have a sports side, this winning at all cost attitude can interfere with the martial arts spirit or the martial arts ethos. And in a good contest, in a good competition, what happens is that you bring out the best in each other. You bring out the best in me, and of course, I bring out the best in my opponent. So you want to beat your opponent when he or she is at her strongest. Now, in that, inevitably, there's a karate tournament in Cobra Kai in the series, and the top student, Miguel, targets a pre-existing injury of his opponent deliberately. So for him, he has taken on this attitude, winning at all cost. But after the tournament, his instructor, Johnny Lawrence, gives this example to the class. He says there are two cobras in the jungle. One kills the strongest lion, the other kills a crippled monkey. Which cobra do you want to be? And of course, another student answers the question, you want to be the fighter who kills the strongest lion. So what happened in this karate tournament is that the idea of a good contest has been abandoned in favor of fighting dirty. Or we can also say that the martial arts ethos has been abandoned. And this is also something that is in evidence in the first season of the series. There are now 3 seasons. I'm making season 4 right now. There is very little evidence in the Cobra Kai dojo of the martial arts ethos, whereas in the Miyagi dojo, run by Daniel, that is still there, the martial arts ethos. It's all about self-defense, finding balance in your life, and so on and so on. And to continue with this, Johnny, the instructor, says to his top student Miguel after the tournament, "You don't have to fight dirty." And Miguel responds, "There's nothing dirty about winning, Sensei. You taught me that." And contrast this with Daniel, who talks to his student who came second, the student who was who had a shoulder injury. And Daniel says to Robbie, his student, "You fought with honor." He didn't. Now I want to contrast this with something that I observed in a martial arts competition 2 years ago, in a taekwondo competition. In Manchester, there, Bianca Wharton was fighting a Chinese opponent, Zheng Shuyin, and Wharton defeated Zheng Shuyin not on points, but by pushing her repeatedly outside the ring. And this led to Zheng's disqualification. And the BBC commentator talked about a win by any means necessary. And after the fight, Wharton said, "I went out there needing to find a different way to win, and a win is a win if you disqualify someone. It's not my fault." So the British fighter's message was, it doesn't matter how you win, it only matters that you win. And here again, I see this abandonment of the good contest, because in the third and final round, the Chinese fighter Zheng was leading 20-10. And out of these 10 points for Wharton, 9 were for pushing her opponent out of the fighting area. So the actual score with 48 seconds left in the third round was 20-1. So Wharton only managed 1 successful punch, and Zheng scored 20 points for good kicks and good punches. So Zheng was the superior fighter. So all she needed, all Wharton needed, is 1 more push out, and she won through disqualification, and that is what happened. So the Chinese competitor was clearly the superior fighter, and she had actually beaten Wharton in 3 previous encounters. So, of course, the audience booed. They were all unhappy with this. The Chinese fighter was also unhappy. She wouldn't celebrate with Wharton. And rightly so, I think, because we have to ask ourselves, what is the central test here? What are we testing? We are testing kicking techniques, punching techniques, and blocking. We are not testing pushing. So in my view, this is a hollow win, similar to the win that we saw Miguel take by attacking a pre-existing injury. So a true martial artist could not enjoy winning in this fashion. I'm talking now about Walkden, the fighter who pushed her opponent out of the ring continuously. So in this bout, we could see that the ethos of the martial art and the ethos of the Olympic sport came apart. Just like in Cobra Kai, where they're only concentrating about winning. Winning is all that counts. And there are actually two other examples from Olympic Taekwondo which come to mind, which show this attitude, abandoning the ethos of the martial art in favor of winning at all costs. For instance, I've observed that if it's a close contest and some coaches ask for a VAR card in the third and final round, only to give their fighter an opportunity to take a breather. Although there is no controversy, there's no need actually to invoke the VAR card. They have it. They didn't use it before, and they use this as a way to give their tired fighter a bit of time to recover. And then the other thing, which is worse, which I also observed, and I think that was actually in Muju, where Joseph was at these championships. Several fighters were comfortably in the lead at the end in the third round, and they just refused to engage with their opponents. And they did so by just stepping out of the ring. They incurred a penalty point, but they were so well in the lead, they could afford it. So they didn't want to engage. And this actually is contrary to the spirit of Taekwondo, because one of its tenets is indomitable spirit. So if you run away from the fight, if you step out of the ring, that does not show indomitable spirit. So this is just to an analogy to show that this there is a problem if you just in martial arts, if you divorce the sports side from the martial arts spirit or the martial arts ethos. You will get a loss of meaning, and sometimes you get moral failure, which is what this moral failure is what Cobra Kai illustrated in that first martial arts tournament, in the first karate tournament. Yeah, another theme I want to talk about is the teaching you see between the two dojos. Johnny's teaching style is there's shouting. He shouts, "Quiet." Then there's humiliation, name calling. He calls his students all kinds of names: lips, princess, tits, and so on and so on. There is also, compared to Daniel, very little explanation of the techniques and very little correction. For instance, one example, if you go to season 1, he tells Miguel to strike and to punch, but he doesn't really show him how to form a fist properly. So at the beginning, his student punches with his thumbs up like rabbit's ears, they're sticking up. And then after some encouragement, the thumbs come down, a bit like that, as if you're holding the reins of a coach. And then I think he shouts at him, Johnny shouts at him and says, "Don't be a pussy." And then miraculously, he forms a proper fist with a thumb behind the first two fingers. Whereas if you contrast that with Daniel, he actually explains the technique and shows it to his student. So Johnny's teaching is poor, and he also doesn't say anything about the martial arts spirit or martial arts ethos. His slogans are strike first, strike hard, no mercy. Then another important thing is that being badass, that's also good, you have to be badass. Then he exhorts his students not to be a pussy, that's his sexism comes out there. And the last thing he says, an enemy deserves no mercy. So he views the opponent always as an enemy. So all of this type of teaching, of course, it is interesting because we are, of course, as martial artists and as academics, influenced by our own teachers. When we start out, of course, copy them. We copy our teachers. And I remember I taught a translation class for German translation class for philosophers and theologians at the University of London, because my first language is German. And of course, I did it just the way I had my translation class as a student when we did translating from Latin into German in the philosophy department. We were just sitting in a circle. Everyone did got allocated one sentence and then went around. And I did the same at the beginning, but then after a while I changed. I realized this is too restrictive. And we see the same thing in Cobra Kai, in the series. Johnny repeats all the bad stuff that his teacher, Kreese, taught him, shouting and humiliation. But both of these martial arts teachers, Johnny and Daniel, outgrow this and realize that they need to find other ways of conveying how to do the techniques, how to become a good student. Yeah. Yeah, Daniel, what's interesting is that Daniel teaches his students defensive moves first, the wax on, wax off stuff, which we all know, because Miyagi-Do stresses karate is for self-defense only, whereas Cobra Kai, the motto is strike first, strike hard, no mercy. Of course, this strike first motto, that might work against people who are not trained fighters, that might work. But when you're faced with an evenly matched opponent, it could make you vulnerable if you want to strike first, if you think you have to strike first. Sometimes it is better to strike second. For instance, when an aggressor attacks, he or she is committed to a particular move. And while he is executing this move, he's at a risk. Because I, as a trained fighter, could read that move and counterattack. So at least in the first season, we see that the different approaches. The Cobra Kai dojo is about aggression, brute force, often anger. And Miyagi Dojo teaches controlled aggression. I think that is the better approach. That's the approach I was taught, controlled aggression. Pure anger may temporarily increase your strength, but it narrows your field of vision. You don't really see, in brackets, in quotation marks, you don't really see your opponents. If the red mist comes over you, often you will let your guard down, and this will make you vulnerable. So I think controlled aggression is the important thing, and that is what we see in Miyagi-Do. Whereas in Cobra Kai, they really blur the line between street fighting and competing in the tournament. It all seems to be the same. In street fighting, of course, you need to finish off your opponent. to the point where they cannot continue to fight. Whereas in a tournament, you don't really need to inflict unnecessary injury or pain. But Chris and Tony Lawrence, they don't really make that distinction. At least Tony Lawrence, not at the beginning. Yeah, well, the other interesting thing is that all students become black belts in season 1 within 9 months. That's astonishing. They all started out as white belts, become black belts after roughly 9 months. And normally quite a few would drop out, and some might take years to get to this level. So as a rule of thumb, out of 10 students who start practicing martial arts, only 1 will still be coming to the dojo after a year. And the drop-off will continue after that. So you need a lot of dedication to master the techniques. And the progress is often slow, and sometimes come home with bruises. And all of this will weed out those who lack the required dedication. And we don't see any of that. But what this illustrates, this quick progress, this is something which happens when you divorce the competition side or the sports side from the martial arts ethos. Then you can make quick progress. But whereas in a traditional dojo, you wouldn't want to promote students too quickly because they are being taught skills which can cause serious injury. So slowing things down is important. It gives the instructor an opportunity to observe the student's behavior in and out of the dojo over time. And that helps them to assess the student's maturity, to assess whether they are fit, they're ready to become a black belt or any other belt. So, so that's why it's important not to promote students too quickly. That's why it's important actually to have the progress to be slow, so the instructor can observe the character of the students. And interestingly, after the karate tournament, after season 1, Johnny Lawrence realizes that his students failed in several respects. First of all, Aisha, Miss Robinson, she loses, and she turns out to be ungracious in defeat. This also is not compatible with the martial arts ethos. Another student, Hawk, he is disqualified for violating the rules because he attacks his opponent while his back is turned during a break. And this leads then to the shoulder injury. It's really because Hawk violated the rules that the students has this injury, which then the eventual winner of the tournament, Miguel, exploits that injury and attacks Miguel. Yeah, so I think I'll stop here.
Thank you, Miroslav.